connected in ways that we can't even imagine. Whether it be our spiritual traditions, our religious traditions, or our cultural traditions, or anything in between, our individual traditions, our philosophical, political traditions, everything is in a coexisting environment on this planet we call Earth, terra firma. Everything is responding to one another. Now, all of the different religions are directly related to one another because even in the scriptures, there is response to one another. For instance, in the Christian Bible, there is a response to the Jews, and the Muslims especially responded to the Jews, and the Muslims also responded to the Christians. And in Hinduism, there's kind of like this absorption of all the different cultures and spiritualities around them, allowing them into Hinduism. And in Buddhism, we find these different ideas about Buddhism and the different, let's say, even gods in Buddhism exist because of the Tibetan form, allowing this pantheon into the Buddhist system. And when it comes to culture, when it comes to like Slavic culture, which started in the Rus tribe in Northern Europe, or Russo or Rus tribe in Northern Europe, and they migrated kind of south and east and kind of just spread around. And they became different things. There's a lot of Slavs that are Polish. There's a lot of Slavs that are Czechoslovakian. There's a lot of Slavs that are Russian, especially. And they kind of became their own nations, as developed to their own people in response to like the Mongolians and the Chinese, and many of the Europeans that kind of traveled north from southern Europe and formed different kind of ethnic groups. We're always responding and collaborating with one another, always existing side by side, whether it be in coexistence or conflict. And we evolve both through, our peace with one another and the conflict with one another. And we see as human history evolves that there is less and less conflict. Now, because we are in this day and age, because we are in this age that feels like, okay, we know the wars that are happening now and they seem terrible because we see them day by day on the news. The media has allowed us to really delve into what's going on in the world, and these wars seem to keep on going, keep on getting worse and worse, and the images keep on imprinting on our minds, and we feel like we're in the end times. We feel like the end of the world is coming, but in truth, there's always been a lot of war in human history, and I actually think that the wars are actually right now, leading up to now, and then in the future, are actually leading to resolutions that allow coexistence, because the UN wasn't created that long ago, the United Nations, and its power has actually been valued by most nations on Earth. And, the Security Council, the major superpowers on Earth, that is a very good, slight but still good checks and balances on the superpowers, and trying to get other nations to kind of reason with them and either influence them towards the positive or negative, depending on what the nations want. And usually the superpowers, United States included, don't really take advice from other nations, but there is this conference that is constantly held at the UN that allows people to collaborate, to really try and understand each other. And this is what we should try to do more, because the UN, a lot of time, it just seems to not be able to do anything. And if we can continue that idea of uniting all nations in this conference of coexistence as human beings, not necessarily as different nations, because these national lines have been drawn and redrawn so many different times, and they've shifted, and we've become different people just so many times throughout history, that we shouldn't give credence to our nations boundaries, but to us being humans and trying to collaborate with one another, trying to truly coexist and not just have the ruse of coexistence. Now, when we look at, our different cultures and how, a lot of Slavs might hate, wherever they settle, they might hate the Asian influence, or maybe the small African influence in Russia. Very small African influence. This is just a minor example. Or they might hate some of the Germans that moved into Russia, the kind of Germanic-speaking people. In the United States, there's still a lot of people here that really hate Mexican culture and Mexicans, and they don't want them to come over the border. Even in Texas, Texas used to be part of Mexico, and it was part of Mexico way before it was part of the United States. But anyway, regardless, there's still a lot of people like here in Texas who despise Mexicans and Mexican culture. They don't respond to it well. But usually these people are those who have these very dualistic ideas of what being a Texan or being American is. Being, I am this, they are that. We should just be this, they should just be that. They should stay out. And that's the kind of response that we see throughout history. And it never works. Because people, once they become close, once they start integrating with one another, they start to realize how similar we are. How, okay, that person is just a person like me. They have a few different beliefs, a few different traditions, but it's okay. We're all collaborating. We're all side by side, and past the skin color, past these traditions or different cultural aspects, we're human beings. And luckily, in Texas especially, Mexican culture and Mexicans have integrated quite well over the hundreds of years, because Mexicans were here first. Really, the Spanish were here first, and Mexico became later. But anyway, regardless, and Native Americans and the Spaniards obviously combined to make different Latin nations. But regardless, this is just an example of how there are some people here that do hate Mexican culture and Mexicans still, but I'm not one of those people, obviously. Now, there's still a lot of people in the United States who think, okay, black people should go back to Africa. We brought them here, as slaves, but, their people gave them over as slaves and sold them, so obviously they deserved it. This is in the words of some racists that I've heard. And then, when they're here, okay, slavery wasn't that bad. We gave them food and lodging, and, they worked for it. It was a fair exchange. Some extreme racists say that as well. And then those who are, racist will also say things nowadays. I've heard all these things nowadays, but I've heard this more than anything else, and I've responded to it. If they don't like it in the United States, if they don't like people being racist against them, why don't they go back to Africa? That is ignorant of so many different levels of history, I wouldn't even know where to start on it. But the idea that human beings that are in a state that has been caused by their slavery, that has been caused by their constant, their segregation later on, and then their discrimination in later years. The idea that it would just disappear and that, okay, that's the same opportunities now, why can't they achieve as much? Why can't they achieve as, the average white man? Is preposterous, because all these historical things add up, and a few decades, even several decades, isn't enough to really uplift different minority communities. But regardless of that, I would say to people that think Africans should just go back to Africa, that just look at how if you're a white guy that really doesn't talk to black people. I was raised around all different races. We're not even different as different breeds of dog. But I've been around all different so-called races growing up, racist and racist. Just talk to and try to speak with somebody who is a different race than you if you haven't done so thus far. In this day and age, that's damn near impossible. But if you haven't, see how human they are. A few different disagreements as far as culture, as far as what they like, but we're all humans and we all have to coexist. We all respond to one another, and we all exist side by side, and really our own cultures are very much developed in relation to all other cultures, including with spirituality and religion. So it's best to get to know your neighbors all around the world as much as possible. That doesn't mean that you go into, the worst part of any given continent with your eyes closed and just hoping somebody will hug you. That means that you must be prepared for, the worst case scenario in case somebody doesn't accept you. But if you want to broaden your horizons, I'd highly suggest that you don't stick to the people that you consider your own people. But to basically bring this to a conclusion, all humans are connected, whether we know it or not. We all exist in relation to one another, whether we recognize it or not. And we all must rely on each other in order for our existence on this planet to continue for any longer, because it's getting very tenuous as far as the populations go and as far as the coexistence goes, because there's so many of us now. We must cooperate. We must be able to take each other's hand and figure out how we can exist on this planet, because if we don't, we might be leading to another World War III. Another World War, which will be World War III. This is in light of recent events with Trump and Putin. But I don't want to get too much into that. But if we can learn to coexist, if we can learn to toss aside those archaic ideas of tribe and still be proud of who we are, but also recognize that other people aren't any less just because I'm proud of who I am, then maybe we can make this planet a better place to live for all human beings. All humans are connected. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been interesting. I hope it's been informative. If it has, feel free to hit that thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. If you want to comment, you have any questions, you have any, maybe you disagree with me or you really agree with me and you just want to say so, feel free to shoot it down in the comment section below. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching. I hope that this has reached some of your hearts. And may all of you have a blessed and peaceful day.